when we first came down here. Right. Yeah, he was. Peter bought me service work. Oh, that Peter has good taste. Yeah, I started getting on this really with the facility manager, which is really good. Come on here. So, show that to her. Very happy.
This is another picture of the shells that they picked up after the storm. This is another group picture. Let me show you this one real quick. Right here.
You can sit here. I see you, man. What are you going to do this summer? What? Oh, yeah. Sorry. If I go somewhere, can I go somewhere? Yes, that's what I'm going to ask. I'll talk to you. Y'all go somewhere. I told you that before, though.
I know, but we want to. Here? Yeah.
Ashley.
I mean, I know the working's okay as long as it's at night. They got to sleep with you.
Oh, really?
They got to sleep with you.
Wait a minute. I had a good chair.
That was they picked those up right after the storm.
I thought you earlier this year.
Oh, nice.
Oh, that's right.
Hi, did I step on you? So hard.
Valdez, mine.
Right, I'm going.
When is it? Are you excited or scared? We're gonna go to the wedding. When is it?
It's nice. The water's nice too. Sure is.
What grade are you gonna be in? You never just
it.
I'm sorry, I was late. What do you want to do? Do you have like an 8th grade graduation? Good for you.
Yes, sleep late, get up, go get the poo, and stay up late.
Are you adult?
Sleep late, go get the poo. Gosh, but that's all.
You look good.
Y'all wanna sit up here?
Yeah.
Where are you sitting?
No. I'm gonna.
Everyone, welcome to the Museum to Port Isabel. My name's Edward Mazza. I'm the director here at the museum. I'd like to welcome you here tonight. This is our ongoing program, our oral history program. It started about 4 years ago. And what we do, we welcome residents from the community to tell their stories, their histories. And we're very happy to have our guest today. And this is the last Thursday of each month at 7 o'clock here in the Treasury. We have different topics. So I'd like to introduce Calvin Byrd, who was our former board president and board member of the Historical Museum. And he and his wife continue to support the museum, and we're very happy to have him here, and he's going to introduce this guest.
Okay.
Calvin.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's a very special lady to introduce tonight. My mom's sister, Lorraine. She's got a great story to tell tonight, and her children are with her here tonight. And I'm going to let Frank take it from there. And, he's a good speaker. And now you got to take what he says with a grain of salt, because he'll make you believe he was there. And I don't think he's quite old enough to be there. But anyway, Frank. Yeah.
My name is Frank Miner, and I grew up pretty much here in Port Isabel. Wasn't born here, but like you said, we got here as quick as we could. I grew up listening to these stories that my mother told, that my great-grandmother told, my great-grandfather told. To give you a little perspective, the family's been here in this area since 1864, I think, something like that, 1863. And Mom may touch on that a little bit later on, but we've been in the valley since then. My great-grandfather sold the very first lot on Padre Island. He worked for John L. Tompkins Realty. I don't think John L. Tompkins Realty is around anymore, but they had a little office right up here where Pirates Landing is, right along in there. and they would take prospects, as he would call them, across the bay on one of the two ferry boats that they had here, fishing boats, what they were really, over to the old Coast Guard station. And the Coast Guard station was just an old house, really, round house. And they would put them on an old half-track, military half-track that they used out in the deserts, probably in somewhere in Africa. And they would take them over the sand dunes, and then they'd show them the property over there. So yes, he sold the first lot. Anyway, I want to introduce my mom, Laureen Valdez Miners, and she will then relay to you some of her adventures on Boca Chica, which is on the other side of the channel. Mom?
Okay. I was born in Brownsville in 1922 and raised in Weslaco. And the family, as he said, was all outdoorsmen and fishermen and hunters and whatever. And so we grew up in that atmosphere. And the story that I'm going to tell is the old Fernandez home on Boca Chica. And it was on pilings, quite high. And to a little kid, it was really high. And though it's boarded up, they had a caretaker named Fred Harvey. And his family was from Brownsville. And we used to play under the house. And the boardwalk almost ended to the water edge of the channel. And we would, my brother and I would fish out in the cove. It was a little cove. And catch reds. And we were quite successful in catching fish for my grandmother to cook. And there was a rumor going around that at the end of the boardwalk, in the water itself, on pilings, there was a dock. General Taylor's army was situated there on near the island, the Fernandez home. But on this dock was a building, small building, and that was their post office. And the rumor was that the storm came along and washed the post office away, and therein was a safe full of money. And it's still buried on this small cove. And anyone who might try to dig it up will have a chore, really. But we played under the house, and there behind the house was a huge cistern, and it was there for the gutters to put the water into the cistern in rainy weather. We were not allowed in the house itself, but the cook house on that other picture, away from the main house, was the quarters for the caretaker. And we were allowed in there. Now, the pictures of the shells are not there,
It's here.
but,
It's over here, Mom.
yeah, okay. My mother and the caretakers gathered all of those shells on the beach of Boca Chica. Now, the house itself sat west of the jetties, almost to the water. And there's a picture of an old Ford, Model A Ford. And the sailor, the Coast Guard in that picture was Nayo Paris. We could see across the channel to the Coast Guard station, and they used to come across the pass and visit all the people on the island. And there were very few people, and this was the largest house on the island at that time. Now, this was 1933, July of 1933, and we were forced to leave because of the storms. There were 3 storms in July and August and September was the main one. And we were forced to leave the islands at July, the first part of July. And they came across the pass. The Coast Guard came across the pass and told us to leave leave Boca Chica because there was a storm coming. And my grandmother had yeast dough for rolls, and on the way home to Weslaco, she carried that pan with the yeast yeast for rolls in it, and it was hot. And a Model A Ford took forever to get to Weslaco. So it would rise up and she would shake it and it would go down. And all the way home, she would shake that pan of rolls. And those were the best rolls. She finally cooked them. But then we came back down and built a small house on the beach, south of the jetties, and then the August storm came and
Now,
took the house
let me ask you a question. When you left for the first storm, what happened to the house?
Where were you staying?
We were staying in a rented greenhouse just by the jetties,
Okay.
and it was washed away.
Okay.
And as well as the Fernandez home, I think was washed away at that same storm,
The July storm.
July storm.
This house here that we're looking at?
If not, it was washed away in the August storm. So we have never been back to, we were never going back to Boca Chica after the August storm.
Okay, so you came back in July and built
Yeah.
Built a little home,
Uh,
house.
It was on pilings also. But those storms were increasing in spring and it washed away a lot of things. I don't remember going back to Boca Chica after the August storm.
Well, tell us a little bit about the time when the storm did come and some of the trials that you had.
Oh,
And as a matter of fact, we'll start right there because this is the most fascinating. She just ripped this off and she took it up, brought it over to the house, and she said, "Frankie," she said, "I want you to read this and tell me what you think." It is really good.
I'm going to let you read.
Mom, that wasn't a plug. Please.
Before we get to that, the big storm that you were in, when you came back after the first storm and you built the house, did you find anything in the sand after that storm?
Oh, yeah.
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 You want to talk about what y'all found?
General Taylor's camp was uncovered the July storm, and that's when we acquired all the relics that are on display.
Is this some of them here?
Yes,
A few of them.
Yeah.
a lot of bottles and bullets and whatever.
Didn't you say that the water would wash and then when it came back were all these little holes and every little hole was a bullet? Right?
Well, there it was under the sand. It was green clay, and it was pockmarked with shallow holes, and every hole had 2 or 3 bullets. And
And that was from the Civil War? Encampment during Civil War?
mhm.
Yes. One of the other artifacts that they found, and I haven't seen it, but they would tell me about it, they found a ball and chain that they would put on the, for the prisoners. Frankie, if you're not good.
And of course, the octagon-shaped barrel revolver, right? Was that around the same time?
Yes.
There's a lot of
that's-
things found
That's
here.
on display.
So July and August wasn't really the storm of
Not
33,
these.
Yeah.
right?
Not these ones.
July was
Which is the storm that you were in, the big one?
the big one, yeah.
The August.
August, yeah. Because they went back, they were run off for the July storm.
Yeah.
And then they came back because they thought it was all over.
Mhm.
She says, the 1933 hurricane, she says, there were 3 hurricanes during the summer of 1933. The first part of July, August, and September, and they grew stronger as each one occurred. We were on Boca Chica before the first one in July. My grandparents had rented a small house near the jetties, and we planned to spend the summer on the beach. Sometime during the morning in July, the Coast Guard sent a longboat with some of the Coast Guardsmen from Padre Island across the channel to warn all visitors of the coming storm. There was a group of soldiers camped nearby, and I don't remember if they stayed or left, but we did leave. My grandmother had planned to have hot rolls for supper. She brought the pan of yeast dough with her on the way home. The weather was so hot, and that made the dough rise faster. I can just see that. All the way back to Weslaco, she was shaking that pan to make the dough go back down, and those rolls were the best ever. After the July storm, my family built a small cottage a short distance south of the jetties. It was built on pilings about 4 feet off the ground. So in high tides, the water wouldn't wash it or come into the cottage. My father had brought down 3 or 4 pumpkins and put them under the house. He was working during the week and came home to the beach on weekends. One morning in early August, we awoke to a very high tide. All of the pumpkins were floating merrily around in the water under the house. No one had warned us that that the storm was coming. We finally did learn that one was coming, and it was a hurricane, and we should leave immediately. My family decided to walk south to the bathhouse at Del Mar. Now, for those of you that know Boca Chica Beach, the only way to get to it is to go through Brownsville and then drive up the beach. And Del Mar was one of the really nice places that people would go and bathe. Go in the surf and swim. No car could have made it as the surf was too high. It was close to 5 miles to Del Mar, and they're walking from their house to Del Mar, 5 miles. It was quite a trek. My mother, grandmother, brother Gene Armand, sister Mary Sue, who was about 5 years old, and a friend, Joe Lofton, who was camped nearby, we all started walking. We left my grandfather, who was a dry goods salesman. This is the same one that I told you sold the first lot on the island. He was also a dry goods salesman. He didn't want to leave his car full of samples. He drove his car as high as it would go on the side of a large sand dune. And there he stayed in the car with a box of crackers, a jug of water, and a small kitten for company. We walked, and the waves were really high. Being a little kid, the waves were as tall as mountains. And when the waves would come in and go out, the force would sweep us away, so we had to hold tight to each other's hands. Mary Sue rode on Joe's shoulders all the way. When we finally reached the Del Mar bathhouse, we climbed the steps and went in through the French doors. We stayed in the lobby until the waves started hitting the French doors. That was when the bathhouse was not safe, as it was also on pilings where the water could get under it and lift it. Joe decided we would go to higher ground, and there was a house with a garage in back that sat on a high sand dune, and it was nearby. There we stayed until Joe had seen what the wind was doing to the cottages. Let me read that again, because this is kind of interesting. They stayed in this garage until the walls began to shake. There were several other people in the garage, but Joe had seen what the wind was doing to the cottages behind the bathhouse. I remember one cottage lifted up by the wind, and it exploded in the air. By that time, the wind was really fierce, and he figured that it was time for us to get out of the garage. He led us to a higher sand dune, and on the lee side dug out a hole for my mom and her little brother, and a larger one for the rest of the people. There was one thing a person should have never done, is leave my brother and I alone for a minute. We would pick on each other and end up in a fight, well, of course. So needlessly to say, we fought the whole time we were confined to the sand dune. I really don't remember sleeping, but we must have, because early the next morning the wind had died enough that Joe decided to take us back to the garage. There was still enough wind to blow a large cistern tank lid inches from the top of Gene's head as he was running down from the top of the sand dune. I was behind him, and I don't think he even saw it. It was like a giant frisbee. When we were back in the garage, the ladies that stayed had found or brought sandwiches, and I remember they gave them to all the children. A well-known man from San Benito demanded his sandwich. One of the ladies let him know in no uncertain terms the children came first. Who was that? No names. No names. Anyway, he was a well-respected man, well-known man from San Benito. Well, anyway, when the storm was finally over, boats came from Port Isabel to Boca Chica and took everyone who wanted to leave back to Port Isabel. I remember there were many people in Port Isabel serving food to the refugees, and among them was a couple named Mr. and Mrs. F.C. McConnell, who was our principal or superintendent of Stephen F. Austin School in Weslaco. What a small world. A happy and sad ending to this story. My grandfather was safe, as well as his car, and samples, and kitten. Although the surf had whittled the dune to a little mound of sand, still he maintained his car and his samples and his cat. But our cottage was gone. Somewhere under tons of sand were all of the things that made our summer so pleasant. We never spent another summer on Boca Chica after that. As I mentioned in the first part of the story, my father would come down on weekends, but he received word on how severe the storm was, and he immediately left Weslaco and headed for the beach. When he arrived at the end of the pavement, the road to Del Mar was impassable. The surf had cut a deep ditch full of fast-running water across the road to Del Mar. The deputy sheriffs tried to keep my father from swimming across, but he said he was going because he had to find his family. Being an excellent swimmer, he made it across and found us all at Del Mar. Note: the first storm in July uncovered an army camp west of the jetties. There were a lot of relics found: old crock bottles, crock inkwells, horse bridle medallions, boots, bullets, pistols, etc. The August storm covered it all back up again. The sea giveth and it taketh away. Lorene Valdez Myers.
Lorene, tell us about some of the things that, I know that y'all found a lot of stuff, and I know y'all took a lot of stuff back to Weslaco, and some of the stuff hasn't survived through the years. I think I remember you telling a story about someone broke into y'all's home maybe and took some stuff, or maybe that's
No,
not quite
it was,
correct, but
in our garage, in Dad's garage, and it was up on a shelf, and supposedly it was all intact.
now, I know some of the stories I've heard through the years was quite a few different things. How did y'all come across the camp? Do you remember how that came about?
No, not really.
Just
Your mother?
out walking around,
Didn't
or
didn't Mama go exploring a lot?
Yeah, Mother was,
Beachcombing?
yeah.
Yeah, the legend
And,
was she was digging in the sand. That was her mother.
Mhm.
My mom's mother was digging in the sand and found that pistol.
Well, she also found a boot with the bones in it.
Yeah.
a boot with bones in it.
Yeah. And what happened to the
Now,
boot?
I had heard that when it uncovered it, of course, it was a clay surface, and that you could kind of tell how the camp was laid out.
Yes.
There were wagon, in fact, wagon wheel tracks still visible.
See, my brother and I were such kids, we didn't notice that. But I remember Mother telling us about the sunken barrels with flour and rice and stuff in it for the troops. And they gathered all the relics. My brother and I were interested in bullets. So we had sackfuls of bullets. And I don't know what happened to the bullets.
You were telling me yesterday or the day before about fishing with Jean and finding the coin, and what
Oh,
happened?
yeah.
What happened to the coin?
Well, when we were visiting the big house, in front of the big house in the cove was good fishing. But I had found a coin on the beach, and I had placed it on the pilings, which were sticky. And I was fishing at the time and figured that I would get the coin later. And a big wave came and washed the coin away. So I never found it again.
Well, I remember your mama talking about it was like the camp had been abandoned fairly quickly, because it seemed like there were a lot of things still pretty much
Oh, yeah.
intact, from cannonballs to just
They're
tent.
probably still there.
The tent, they said that the tent stakes were you could tell where the tents were laid out, the tent stakes were still there, just lots and lots of things like that.
Well, there were so many things that were uncovered, and as I said, a little kid was interested in bullets.
Yeah.
So how long had it been since the soldiers had left and y'all was there?
Mm-hmm.
A long time?
Yes, well,
It had to be about Yeah, probably
70
60
years.
years or so.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Hours until the storm abated, and maybe we slept. I don't know. I don't remember. But actually, I think we fought the whole time.
How old were you?
11.
Who was, right?
So do you remember being afraid when you were walking through the surf?
No.
Did you ever
Why did you not ever return? Your family, why did they never return back to Boca?
No.
Why?
No, because of situations or circumstances.
Not because they were afraid to go
No,
back.
no.
Didn't work.
No.
So y'all moved back to Wesley Cove?
So Boca Chica was a popular destination for people up the valley to
Yeah.
come spend the summers or part of the summers and things like that?
I still have friends that I went to school with, and they remember going to Boca Chica also with their families.
Probably because you could drive to
Yes.
it. Where here you had
It's
to.
easy to get there.
Well, we couldn't get to the island because the causeway wasn't built.
Right.
Yeah, and there was no one on the island
Mm-mm.
at that time.
Well, I know that same camp was uncovered after the storm of Beulah, Hurricane Beulah, and lots of bottles picked up and other things picked up. So it's been uncovered through the years
Yeah.
with other storms also.
I'm sure, but there's,
Tons.
must be a lot left that's covered up.
Well, I don't know, Rod might have most of it, but I'm not.
Which
remember
one's
when my
Rod? Okay.
My brother and I used to fish, and we cast out, if it got hung on something, and we tried to get, we just knew it was that safe. We just, oh, that's the safe, Frankie. We'll jump down there and get it. I'm not getting in there, water.
There's a 1934 article in the pilot after the Del Mar rebuilt, because they rebuilt after the storm of '33, and they talked about all these new construction materials they used to make the facility safer. This time the cottages were not going to blow away. This time the bathhouse was not going to blow away. They're trying to get tourists to come back down there again.
Ed pointed out that there were like 20 tropical storms that year. 20. And of course, the three hurricanes she refers, these old copies of the Portisville pilot talk about all three of them. This is a July issue, talks about the July storm. This is an August issue, and this is a September issue. And each one of them talk about those three storms that you talked about. And here's it's kind of interesting. This is a storm damage merchandise sale going on at a store, and these are all from 1933. And there was one here that was kind of interesting. I was gonna.
Calvin, how come they're not Point Isabel Island?
Because the port, it was changed to the Port Isabel once the port was built.
In '33?
1928.
28 was when it was
Oh,
changed.
okay.
There's one interesting one here, talking about storm damage. Well, here in Port Isabel, and then there's one talks about damage all over the valley. But this one here talks about storm damage at Port Isabel. Let's see. The greatest damage was in well, of course, Brownsville experienced a lot of damage too. It says Port Isabel was damaged to the extent of $50,000, which I guess at that time was quite a bit of money. And it talks about all the different buildings in town that were damaged and everything. And then there was another one here. I'll find it. This one here talks about this was apparently you said the storms progressively got worse, so this is from the September issue. So this one here talks about Lower Rio Grande Valley suffers large property damage when storm strikes the coast. And it says, luckily only a few lives were lost. But it goes into quite a bit of detail about damage all through the valley. So apparently it affected the entire valley quite a bit. So.
Was it a hurricane or a storm? A hurricane?
They call it storm, and then when they write, it says storm, but when they write the articles, it's hurricane. Remember, at that time, they were building Port Isabel, a city where a city belongs, and they were investing a lot of money. And so if you read the newspapers, they don't really focus on the storm, just a little bit, and then they have little stories saying that it was not fair, that San Benito News was saying that no one survived the storm in Port Isabel, trying to bring the tourists back to. The fishing was great, yes.
Yes.
They did that with Beulah. I was living in Houston, and they said everything was wiped off the map in Port Isabel, and I was worried to death about my family here,
That's
It's terrible.
We were all treading water.
I know that.
Was there, I have a question.
Eating Beulah butter.
Was there ever a bridge, because in one of the newspaper articles, they talk about expanding a bridge after the storm to Boca Chica.
Do you remember?
From 300 feet to 800 feet. Talk about that.
There was a roadway built out of lumber for just the 2 tracks for the wheels.
Yes.
And that began at the end of the pavement and almost went to Del Mar because there was a section, a beach that was real soft, and they built this track for automobiles. And I remember my father would always stop at the end of the pavement and let all of the half of the air out of the 4 tires, because flat tires went across the sand easier.
It's a little tip for y'all that get hung up in the sand.
There you go.
The air out of your tires about halfway and you go right out.
It's gonna blow the tires back up.
And he always carried a pump,
There you go.
There was a road from Brownsville going to Boca Chica.
Yeah.
It was always a road. Also, I have a question. The first article that's up there shows a bathing beauty. See there? At the time, in July, it opened the casino, the Port Isabel Casino, and it was called On Lake Isabel. Had you heard about that? There was swimming there, there was activities, and it was amusing.
It's on the island.
Port
It was on the
Isabel
island.
Casino.
Oh, no, it said it's on.
Oh, yes, there was a pavilion out from the hotel, the 2-story hotel
Which
on,
Queen Isabel.
On the island or on
no,
Boca Chica?
Port Isabel.
Port Isabel.
And it went out walkway to
Out into the water. This one right here.
to the pavilion, and I guess it was a block long
And where was
from
it?
the mainland.
Queen Isabella.
The old railroad track went out, just went right on into the bay. That's where it
And
went.
there was a
right down there.
pavilion out there, and what did
Yeah.
you do there?
They danced.
Danced and drank and
Gambled.
gambled and
And gambled.
Really?
They're always referring to Lake Isabel.
Lake Isabel. Do you know anything about a Lake Isabel? Maybe it was the bay. No?
They show a little
Lake
cottage and
Isabel.
everything. I don't know. I think
Showed a little cottage next to it, and it was advertised as Lake Isabel.
And right there, it talks about it with that lady, the picture of the lady up there.
There's an article about it. Thousands throng Isabel Casino Sunday to witness aquatic event. I bet it's the lucky 7.
And it says it's on the outskirts of Port Isabel, doesn't it?
It's on the outskirts of Port Isabel. It's really interesting. If you read it, they say it's a lake, and that at one time they were saying that some of the bathers were saying that the top 3 feet, it was about 6 feet deep, the lake, and that on the top was cool water and the bottom was scalding hot water. And they were trying to figure out what it was, and that they didn't know what it was, that it was just a phenomenon that happened. And it's called Lake Isabel. It's just amazing. There's even a drawing of it that shows, you know, a group of buildings, and it describes how they were dancing till midnight, and the lake had big lamps so they could bathe at night, and they refer to it as a lake. So I don't know if it's a turning basin next to the fingers, or it might be another lake that a hurricane must have just covered it or something.
I've never heard.
What year is the article?
It's right there. The newspaper has it right.
July 12, 1933.
I never heard any.
Well, we were.
That hurricane, I guess, just wiped it out.
Yeah, well, that's what
Isabel
happened.
at the
They wiped
time.
it out because it's real sad. They had the grand opening in July, and then it didn't. The first hurricane didn't knock. It was the last one that they told, and then they were rebuilt.
We never know nothing about it.
Lasted 2 months and it was gone.
Big part of his restaurant, no one
me.
remembers
You weren't
it.
even born. Huh?
You weren't even
Calvin,
born.
did
No.
you ever hear of it?
Huh?
Did you ever hear of it?
No.
Never heard of it.
Nanny and Posse never mentioned.
Never heard of
Well,
it.
if we haven't heard of it, it didn't exist.
That's right. If it did exist, Frank would know about it. Okay.
Quite interesting.
Some man knew enough to dig a hole behind the highest dune he could find, because I'm from the Midwest and we have to do the same thing with tornadoes. If you're caught now, you've got to find a ditch as low as you can to
Yeah.
get into.
Yeah, and the comment that she made in there about the top of the cistern blowing off, I remember here in Port Isabel, there was a military reservation. We used to call it the reservation.
Yes.
There were several homes that were built by the military, I guess for officers, and behind each one of them was a big cistern. And the top of this thing was probably 4 feet across and about that thick of concrete.
Wasn't it concrete?
Yes, with 2 great big old iron handles that 2 men would have to pick up to take off the top. So the wind must have been really blowing, or a mini tornado or something, to take that top of that cistern off and shoot it across like that.
Well, I'm sure it was a tornado.
Yeah.
It would have surely killed anyone it did.
Cottage.
Very close.
Thank you for coming and telling your story.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting.